Hi, this is Tom Vander from Getting Smart. We're talking middle grade math today with math guru Tim Hudson from DreamBox Learning. Hi, Tim.
Hey, how are you, Tom?
And with us is the math maven Megan Mead from Getting Smart. Hi, Megan.
Good morning.
Tim, you know, a lot of people in literacy say that there's a shift that has to happen in fourth grade where kids transition from reading to learn to learning to read, and that there's a set of really core skills that sort of unlock the rest of the world for young people. Are there some similar foundational skills that you guys really try to work on in third and fourth grade?
Yeah, we consider like algebraic reasoning, which everyone talks about Algebra 1 as a gatekeeper, a break point. Success in Algebra 1 so correlated with what students do beyond that. We definitely think that the algebraic reasoning that students do, and it's in the standards as well, like Common Core, for example, operations and algebraic reasoning starts really early. So really engage.
I think of that as sort of an Algebra 1 high school kind of thing, right? But you think it's really important early?
We tend to think of the ninth grade Algebra 1 as a more formalization where students are engaging in a far higher level of abstraction, way more variables, but operating in those same algebraic ways, like with the distributive property, with actual numbers rather than variables. And kids can be doing that quite early. Yeah, I guess one other thing I'd say about that break point in literacy is there is a certain point where you have to understand the number system, and then you go on to sort of use the number system to model things and complexity, whether statistics or in physics. So there's kind of a break point there, I suppose, but you really deeply need to understand the number system.
When I think of intermediate and middle grades and the really key skills that get kids ready for success in high school, I think of fractions. Thinking in terms of ratios and proportionality is a lot of kids seem to struggle with that. Why is that?
Yeah, there's probably several different reasons. One being a lot of times fractions are introduced in ways that are limiting for how kids need to broadly think about fractions as division, as ratio, as proportion. Like when you start off by saying here's you know, 4 squares and 2 are blue and 2 are red, and then you start talking about, oh well, 2 out of 4, that's a fraction. That's a certain kind of a modeling of fractions, but it ends up limiting how students think about fractions as numbers. And yeah, it's totally a critical understanding for algebra.
Megan, did you used to have high school kids show up not getting fractions at all?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that was probably the most likely skill that we had to go back and reteach, and I think it was a lot due to the fact that kids had learned all these different tricks throughout their elementary grades of how to do things and what to do.
Tricks, but they didn't really connect fractions with proportionality. Is that?
No, and I don't think they understood the true concept of what a fraction was representing. So it was that connection that was missing.
So this is one of the cool things about both adaptive learning and game-based learning, that you really do have a better chance of connecting the mechanics that we're talking about with the understanding fractions as proportionality, right?
Yeah, and there's also a great opportunity with, you know, sort of nonlinear sequencing where students can be engaging with fractional ideas in all of those different contexts and with all of those different models in order to develop a more robust understanding rather than a really a narrow one. Like a similar thing that happens frequently in Algebra 1 is, you know, the first 2 months of Algebra 1 are spent on linear relationships, and kids get so locked into the idea of linear y equals mx plus b that by the time you move on to exponentials, quadratics, it's really hard for kids to break free of that idea that everything's a line. So having a more connections throughout the curriculum and opportunities for students to engage with the same idea in different contexts is very critical.
Jason Zimba, one of the key authors of the Common Core Math Standards, read a blog on Getting Smart this week, and he said it was really important to ensure that a majority of students spend the majority of their time on a set of power standards. Do you also see it that way, that there's a set of core concepts and you really do want to focus, time, and attention on those?
Yeah, and that's actually how DreamBox was designed from the very beginning. When DreamBox first was released, it was only for K2 because we knew we needed to start very early. And at the
Right.
time, the Common Core hadn't been written, hadn't been drafted, and we used the NCTM focal points. And so you see that same idea that there are at every grade level. There's pretty general consensus of what the important ideas in mathematics are developmentally. I say grade level, but of course, the ideas, depending on the age of the student, are sort of separate from that. But yeah, we've always focused on like the major clusters that are listed in the Common Core, were highlighted in the focal points.
You're working on content for intermediate grades and thinking about the middle grades. How do you think about middle grade kids being different than the primary kids that you started serving? How are their brains different?
Yeah.
How do you think about instructional design differently for them?
So yeah, it's an excellent question. Something that we talk about all the time on our team. One of the main things that is interesting is, we have virtual manipulatives. So we've taken things like a math rack, like a 10 frame, and we've not only digitized them in DreamBox, but we've also empowered them with the kind of adaptivity that our platform offers. And we have lessons written by teachers, so we can ask kids different questions, better questions, higher order thinking tasks than you could have asked previously with those manipulatives. Now, a six-year-old will play with a math rack and kind of feel like it's a game. But if you take that same manipulative, if you take a manipulative and just digitize it for a 6th or 7th grader and say, hey, this is a math game, they're not going to believe you. They've played way too many games. So yeah, we have to structure the engagement a little bit differently. We have to give different kinds of purpose to the task while still figuring out how to engage them with the manipulatives so they can make sense of things rather than, as Megan said, just learn a lot of tricks.
Interesting. So you may have to approach the math differently. You may have to skin the game differently. So there's a number of different dimensions you guys are thinking about.
Yeah. It's what do middle schoolers like, right? That's that's the
good question.
It's an ever-moving target.
Tim, let's talk about blended learning and how people might be using DreamBox to complement other forms of instruction. Teachers can get a lot of data from DreamBox, right? How would you like to see that data used?
Always, in the best interest of the student. I think what blended learning sort of provides and what DreamBox and other software can provide is information the teacher might not otherwise have. For example, if students are able to compose numbers optimally. If you think about our place value system, it is an optimal, you could write 49 as 20 plus 10 plus 10 plus 9, but we write it as 4 10s, and I mean, it's an efficiency sort of thing, and that's what mathematicians work for. They look for optimal solution paths. So we can provide that sort of data to teachers to give them insight into students thinking more deeply. I think on a more practical level, the struggle teachers have, and people have written on this quite extensively, is there's a broader range of diverse learners in today's classrooms.
Right.
You've got a 4th grade, a 5th grade, a 6th grade classroom. Gosh, by the time you get to middle school, sometimes students are still working on 3rd grade content.
Right.
So with DreamBox, we actually provide the adaptivity for teachers to trust that DreamBox will be engaging students where they need, and then providing that information to say, hey, they're making progress in 3rd grade standards, 4th grade standards. We had one 7th grade student using DreamBox over this past year, who was at the 1st grade level, really, and the math coordinator called me up to say, this student was able to finish the 1st grade curriculum in about 8 hours, and that's a key gap thing. It's less about the time and more about the rigor in our lessons to know that they really are deeply understanding those 1st grade things.
So do some schools use the data from DreamBox to help small group instruction that might supplement it so that kids have more of a coherent math program?
Yeah, that's one of the reports that we developed last year based on a lot of feedback we got from teachers, great ideas, was a teacher can pick a particular Common Core standard and with a single mouse click see which students in their class have completed that in DreamBox with proficiency, that they know it, which students are currently working on it and sort of how far along they are, and then which students haven't even gotten there yet in DreamBox. So, if you're teaching, let's see, if you're teaching ratios and proportions next week, you can go see which students already have some insights and some understanding there that DreamBox has collected evidence of. And sometimes I think that means, setting up some sort of rotational model, some small group work, so a teacher can manage that in the classroom. But I think other
Right.
times it can actually just be used in the back of the teacher's mind to say, you know what, tomorrow, and this is something Jason Zimba wrote in that article, tomorrow we need this whole class to be together working
Yeah.
on this problem, thinking about this. It doesn't matter if you're working on 8th and 9th grade math or if you're working on 1st and 2nd grade math. It's an accessible task that's worth discussing as a community of mathematicians.
That's cool. I wanted your opinion on that. I thought that was interesting that he said on a regular basis the whole class could work on a well-designed, carefully sequenced problem. It sounds like a lesson from Japan.
Yeah, and it's actually it's embedded in sort of the DNA of DreamBox too, that we've always been designed to sort of complement great math communities in the classroom, and that's our advisors Skip Fennell and Kathy Fosno. Kathy Fosno has a ton of resources that would likely be considered sort of along the lines of the Japanese model, sort of in a comparable way, to say she's developing communities of mathematicians who engage each other, who tackle rich problems that have ambiguity, that have a lot of noise, where students have to think mathematically to sort through that noise and really strengthen each other's ideas through rich conversation and proving your point in a critical community, which is exactly what mathematicians do.
Yeah, that's exciting vision then for me of this adaptive, personalized learning, along with what might be team-based, authentic instruction around a real-world problem, and the combination of those two seems like it could be really powerful.
Yeah, it's with blended learning, it's about being more thoughtful and strategic about the use of precious class time. So rather than saying I have a class of 30 students and they're all over the place, they're very diverse and different levels of prior knowledge, but for the teacher to say, okay, maybe we're using something like DreamBox so that students are getting that sort of personal workout that they need, that we trust is rigorous and conceptual. But then I say as the teacher, okay, what are some things that we can only do that when we have this diverse range of learners in a single classroom, that I as a parent, one thing that I can't provide is a community of a bunch of other 5th or 6th graders who can refine my child's ideas. So having that rich dialogue not only is great for learning, but it also brings more purpose and value to give students reason to be at the school, because you can't get that any other way.
Tim, I want to go. Oh, go ahead, Megan.
I was just going to say it's interesting too as we look at middle school, and it's such an interesting time for kids developmentally. Right. So, when they have that peer interaction and everybody's voice is heard and they build off of each other, I think it does so much more for just the math, but also to be able to talk through things. It's a big time of peer development and peer tutoring and things like that.
It's very cool. I mean, one of the great things about games is that it's okay to fail. Right, and kids know that in both casual gaming and in DreamBox, that there's supported failure and instructional feedback that comes with it. But if a teacher can create that same kind of environment in a classroom where it's okay to struggle, right, where there's peer support for struggle, not peer pressure against struggle, and where you can create that sort of an environment where it's okay to struggle in a team with a tough concept, that's really neat if it can be supported both in a game-based environment like DreamBox and in a classroom.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like to think of the math classrooms I want for my kids are places where they can engage in really great thinking and dialogue, rather than as places where they go to just acquire some information that arguably a calculator might be able to give them. Yeah. And I think too about I read it's a New York Times article a few weeks ago about a debate going on right now among the leading astrophysicists in the world, that there's something about the shape of space or the speed of light. I don't know, there's something that hasn't been resolved yet. There's a lot of theories out there. And one of the leading, maybe they were at Berkeley or some high prestigious university, one of the leading astrophysicists, he said, for the past 3 months, I've been in this camp. And I'll probably be there a little more, but, I might go back to my original thought that there isn't an answer yet. And we would want students to, maybe they leave a math classroom one day thinking, I'm not 100% convinced, but I'm going to think on it more. And then one of the best days we had at a summer school program with Kathy Fosno was the next morning. A student came in and he's like, I couldn't get to sleep last night because I was thinking about this problem, and here I changed my mind. I've got a new idea.
That's awesome.
That's what we're shooting for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's perfect. I want to wrap things up by going back to where we started and just underscore algebraic reasoning. I was so happy to hear you say that starts early. When I think about what's the most important sort of mathematical understanding, in addition to a certain automaticity of computational skills, the ability for kids to think about multivariable problems as they come into high school seems so important to me, and I'm glad to hear that you think that starts early, and that you think a platform like DreamBox can help develop that.
Yeah, when I was a math coordinator, I came across a presentation one time where someone asked the question, what is pre-calculus? That the idea of associating the term pre with a course, like we had some students in the district where I was the math coordinator who would take pre-algebra 1 in 7th grade, pre-algebra 2 in 8th grade, and if they were still failing, they'd come to high school and take pre-algebra. That's 3 years of the same course, and arguably, mathematically, from a curricular standpoint, we don't have pre-anything else. There's no pre-geography, no pre-Spanish. You just do it. And in DreamBox, we engage students in algebraic reasoning rather than, that course was more designed as you need these skills before you can do this rigorous thinking. And I think we have plenty of experience in student performance data. Talk to any adult who didn't like algebra. And that idea that you're not ready for great thinking until you have some skills, I think is problematic for learners.
Yeah. That's great. It's been great to talk about math with Tim Hudson from DreamBox. Thank you, Tim.
Hey, thanks, Tom. It's been fun. Thanks, Megan.
Thanks, Megan.
Tim.